The question is, what struggles in your 20s did God guide you through that prepared you for marriage? So, two things immediately came to mind in answering this question. The first thing that comes to mind, or one of the things that comes to mind, is I don't have the perfect way of articulating it, but basically learning not to rely on my parents in my 20s, rather to rely on God and rely on my parents less and less as I got older. Why did that prepare me for marriage? Because in marriage, the Bible says that a man shall leave his father and mother, and a woman also, by the way, and join his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. When you're married, you need to learn how to remove yourself from your previous family, join to your husband, and build a new family. So you're no longer able to rely on your parents and your family members in your family of origin in the same ways once you're married that you used to when you were still single. Some kinds of parents have I don't know if I can say a tendency or like an urge that they can't help, I guess, but want to coddle their children. It's from a loving place, but it's not the best all the time. It doesn't always help children to launch. I think if I let my parents, they would have coddled me a lot more. But for some reason, God gave me the foresight and the strength to be able to rely on them less, even when I had opportunity to rely on them more, so that the transition into marriage just ended up being a lot easier. For example, especially as a daughter, of course, and the conversation of whether you should stay with your parents until you're married or not is like a whole different conversation. I'm not addressing that right now. But just as an example, particularly daughters, parents would be more than happy for you to stay home, not pay any rent until you get married. But when you're not paying your own bills, and rent is just one of them, but let's just say rent or whatever other bills, you can have like a false sense of reality and what it is to be an adult and to take care of yourself. So I'm just using that as an example, if you don't push yourself to take care of yourself in certain ways, then when things are difficult in your marriage, you may find yourself wanting to run back to your parents, either for financial help. It could be emotional support, that you have a kind of relationship with your parents that is very friendly, that is very, sort of open. Maybe the boundaries are more lax. So then when you get married, it can become hard to refrain from telling your parents certain things that could actually sabotage either the marriage itself or your parents' relationship with their, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, whatever the case. All that to say, I'm very grateful that the Lord taught me to rely on Him through experiences that I had in my 20s, such as traveling to Brazil, traveling to China, where I eventually met my husband, learning to be so far away from my parents, like literally across the entire world, and learning to have to look to God to provide my needs, to take care of me, to give me wisdom and discernment about decisions that I was making over there and so forth. Those are some of the things that the Lord taught me that prepared me for marriage. Then another thing that prepared me for marriage is waiting till I was married to have sex. So basically like sexual purity. I wasn't completely pure, but to the extent that I was pure, I believe it was a great, great help to my marriage. Why? Because once I got married, I didn't have all this sexual history following me and baggage following me into my marriage. So that was a great help to my marriage and gave me a good start to my marriage. And as well, the self-control, the reliance on the help and strength of God to remain a virgin as much as I could refrain from sexual activity with someone who wasn't my husband, taught me a lot of discipline, which is very useful to my marriage, useful to my motherhood, even to my being a wife, because marriage has had different seasons. I'll be pregnant and different things. And I can say this for my husband as well. This is very important because I think people understand that it's good for a woman to be abstinent, but sometimes people don't have the same convictions when it comes to men. But I think this is even more an advantage to men because like when I was pregnant, or let's say postpartum, right after I had the baby, like I couldn't, we couldn't have sex for a particular amount of time or maybe as frequently as in other seasons of life. And so my husband has a level of self control that is very useful to our marriage in different seasons of life because he also was abstinent before marriage. And so I think that prepared both of us for marriage in really positive ways. I hope that answers your question. There may be other things, but those are like the main things that came to my mind.